Welcome to Good Goodbyes, the Funeral Facts podcast. We are really glad you found us. In this podcast, me, Simon, a funeral director,
And me, Tina, I'm an independent celebrant.
we're going to discuss all things funeral in an informal space to demystify what happens when we say goodbye.
Based on your questions and queries, Si and myself are two industry professionals that are going to chat through the hows, whats, and wherefores. We actively work in the funeral industry in Devon in the UK. So, we hope you enjoy the episode ahead. Welcome to Good Goodbyes.
Hello, and welcome to Good Goodbyes, the Funeral Facts podcast with me, Si.
And Tina. Hello, what are we talking about today, Si?
So, we are going to be talking today about pre-planning. And this is pre-planning, not necessarily from a funeral plan point of view, although we will touch on it, but just generally having the conversation about what you want when your time comes and how in depth you can go with that, how you can have that conversation with me, the funeral director, with Tina, the celebrant. You can do all these things so that you take a little bit of ownership and control of your own party.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think this is becoming a little bit more common. It's something I offer as one of my services, and I don't necessarily have to officiate the funeral in the end, but it's something I offer, and I've had a bit more take up on it in recent times. So yeah, I think it's becoming something people are thinking about a little bit more.
Absolutely, and we talked before on here how actually there's nothing worse than a family being left in a position that they had no idea what they're doing for you and for their loved ones, and it's a really difficult position to put your family in. Not that I'm playing a blame game by any stretch, but what we're here to talk about is how you can do that and what forms that can take, because it can be as simple as writing it on the back of an envelope, just writing down some music when you hear it, or whatever that might be. And yeah, absolutely, you can go to the lengths of taking out a funeral plan and meeting with the celebrant and almost writing the whole service. But it can just be some instructions, just leaving some notes.
Mm.
Um, there's definitely an element of people wanting to be more involved, though, recently, Tina, I would say.
Mm. Yeah, because a few things come to mind as we're talking about this. One is going into a home, on a referral from a funeral director. I went to visit a family, and when I walked in, one of my early questions is, did you have any idea what they wanted, the person? And this girl said, "Oh yeah," and she got this box, just like a shoebox, put it on the table, and on the top of it said, "My funeral stuff," and inside was just clippings and cuttings and obviously things that this person had read or poems and obituaries, and obviously there were aspects of all of this stuff that this person thought would be interesting or might be resources. So it was so helpful. It wasn't like a plan in the most literal sense, but it meant that me and the daughter could go through this, and she was going, "Oh yeah, she really liked that poem, or shall we read something out of this book?" And it was really helpful.
That's so good, isn't it? And I've been in the same position. I've kind of had families walk in and put piles of paperwork down in front of me and say, right, so he went to this funeral and he wanted that celebrant, and he went to this one and he liked that hymn, and it makes the conversation so much easier, and you can almost see it sort of across the family that they're so much more relaxed because they know they're doing right by their person, that they
Mm.
know what they're asking for and what we're putting together is what they wanted. And I think there's a huge sense of relief in that for the family that are left behind, because
Yeah.
there's always that great kind of question of who's the funeral for. Is it for the deceased, or is it for the people that are left behind? Um, Problem is, the people that are left behind sometimes feel like they haven't done the funeral that their person would have wanted. So I think this negates that quite a bit,
Mm.
and it can be a really, is cathartic the right word?
Mm.
Like a
Yeah.
process to go through, like if you're dying, because you've got that kind of that sense of if I know it's going to be right and I know my family are going to be okay.
Mm. Yeah, because it makes me think of a couple of things. One is the film Four Weddings and a Funeral. So
Yep.
in the beginning of that, Liam Neeson's character, he's a husband, he's lost his wife, and he is speaking at her funeral. I don't know if anyone's seen this film. I'm sure this is not a spoiler due to the title, but he's at her funeral and she wants Bay City Rollers played, and she's on the background. There's kind of a photo montage of her life, and he says, "And now we are going to hear the Bay City Rollers, Bye Bye Baby song." And he says, and I said to her, "Over my dead body, are we playing that?" And she said, "No, it will be over mine."
I am really sorry. I've got to correct you. That was in Love Actually.
You are so right. I think it was Four Weddings and a Funeral because I'm a funeral celebrant and I'm obsessed with funerals.
Yeah.
You're
Love Actually is one of my
right. It
favourite
is
films. So
Love
sorry.
Actually. No, you're so right. Thanks for saying that. As I'm sending people off on a right goose chase, be watching Four Weddings and a Funeral and thinking, what
Yeah.
no. Yeah, that's right.
Also,
Love Actually, you are so right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and if you haven't seen Four Weddings and a Funeral at this point, I know spoiler alerts don't really count. It was 30 years ago. Come on, keep up.
Yeah, so that's kind of very poignant, isn't it? And I think part of the reason being, that he is doing what she wants, even though it's not his cup of tea to have at the basic rollers.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
absolutely. Um, on a more formal side, I will touch on it. Funeral plans. So, funeral plans are one of those things that I have conversations with a lot because there was a lot of bad press about them. And hopefully, now we're in a position that we can say that it's all good. So the Financial Conduct Authority took hold of funeral plans in the funeral industry. So they are keeping a much closer eye on making sure that the money goes where it's supposed to go and is secured in trust and things like that. So when you're putting a plan in place, make absolutely sure that this is an FCA regulated member in whatever form that might take. So I myself, I'm an IAR, so I'm an introducer. I introduce you to a funeral plan company. That way I never see the money. The money goes in trust with a plan company instead. But there's lots of different options. You just need to be making sure that you're using someone that is FCA regulated because it means your money's safe and your money's secure. A lot of people were ripped off. It was shocking to see, but from a not being too formal on our nice relaxed podcast, but you can be more confident now and more secure
Yeah.
in your trust of the funeral plan market.
And some people really get a lot of reassurance and feel a lot more comfortable, don't they, if they've made those kind of plans, financial and otherwise. And it is good to talk about that regulation side, actually. I think it gives people a lot of comfort.
Yeah,
And, for those listening in, as well as the ones who are shouting out, "It's not Four Weddings and a Funeral," but the rest of you who are listening in and thinking, actually, I don't know if this is me, I don't know whether I want to do any planning. I always say to folks, just because you talk about sex, you won't get pregnant. So talking about dying and your death and your funeral will not bring it about. It's okay to plan. And it's a bit like house insurance. A lot of us have this and it sits on the shelf and we don't use it year to year, but it
yeah,
gives some sort of comfort.
absolutely. Yeah, oh, insurance is a great analogy, isn't it? Because
Mm,
yeah, you hope you're not going to need it, but it's there when you do.
yeah. And then often I've known people do these kind of things and just go, well, I can relax now. Because for some people, it's kind of a whole bundle of things. They do their powers of attorney, they do their wills, they get their funeral planned. Um, and sometimes they pop in the funeral directors, don't they? Do you find that happens much, Si?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and it's definitely. I would say when someone loses someone, that quite often triggers it. It
Mm,
brings about their own kind of mortality and that thought process. But you're right, yeah. When you do wills, power of attorneys, things like that, you start thinking, well, okay, well, funeral plans as well. Again, if it's stuck in an envelope somewhere, all in one place, and you forget about it, and it can sit there for 30 years, or
mm,
you can drop back in and like with the shoebox, just stick something extra in there or pop something else. And I think
mm,
that's a really positive thing to do.
mm.
Uh, because yeah, it's part of life.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean, at the early part of the summer, I did go and sit with a lady who knew she was actively dying, and she'd asked the hospice to um, enable her in some way to have a conversation about what she wanted at her service. And me and her husband sat with her and we got a pretty good idea, actually. Not a life story, not anything like that, but just, poems and songs and the order of events. And what was really great about that conversation was, and you mentioned this earlier, she said at some point, and then there will be a space, and then the other people who want to say something can say something. So I won't plan the whole thing in detail. I'll leave these spaces for other people because I think she was recognizing that, there would be tributes that people would want to say in a form of eulogy or something. So
Yeah.
yeah, and she died probably 6 weeks after I met her. But I guess it gave people an incredible amount of comfort that that service was, designed by her, really.
Yeah. I'm gonna give a shout out to another celebrant. Sorry, Tina, but there's a chap local to us here called Charles Russell. You know Charles, don't you, Tina?
Oh, he's
Um,
amazing. He's amazing.
he,
He's an award-winning celebrant, everybody, so I don't mind at all sharing
there
my
you go.
colleagues. No, no, he's
Um,
fantastic.
on Charles's website, he has a download available, and I would implore you, if you haven't started writing anything down, download this because it's a really great template. And it's called "My Funeral Wishes, My Story, My Memories." And it just kind of, you can fill it in your own time, bit by bit by bit, and it just gives your loved ones a bit of a guide. I mean, I touched on it before. I couldn't tell you where my own father went to school.
Mm.
I don't know. So my mum's been married a few times. I don't know where any of that happened. Like these are things that may not you may not have conversations about, but actually should probably be in a eulogy.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
so yeah, worth looking at. Definitely worth looking at.
It's a great mention because it's an excellent resource, and I know other celebrants recommend it too. So no,
Yeah.
fantastic thing to mention. Um,
And Charles is a listener as well. So hi, Charles.
yeah, hello, Charles. No, absolutely. I mean, I think that's what's really nice about our community, our funeral community, is it just does feel like a great sharing, learning place. So
Yeah,
we're happy to recommend, aren't we, Si?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So, in talking about just preparing, I mean, the other thing to mention and the other place to look for information is the Coffin Club. So, there's two
Yes.
ladies who've started a club, and it's across the UK, and they do training and they do other things. And their patron is Miriam Margulies, and she's a force to be reckoned with, isn't she? But they have lots of resources as well on their website, and they really encourage people to um, have these kind of conversations that Si and I are having today, really.
Yeah, yeah, forced to be reckoned with doesn't even cover it with her, does she? Wow. Yeah, I watched that Graham Norton interview with her the other day, and like the faces of huge superstars that were just blushing and couldn't
I
quite know
know, I know.
how to deal with her is just amazing.
She doesn't hold back. She went to one of these death cafes when they were filming her talking about death because she did a series a couple of years ago. And it was one of these places where you decorate your own coffin. It's called the Coffin Club. People go for, drinks and what have you and talk about what they want. And you can make your own coffin. And Miriam was assisted to make her own coffin and then insisted on lying in it to see if it was comfortable. And even the women at the cafe were just perplexed at this. And then the most greatest hilarity was because she's a curvaceous lady, is she got inside this thing and then she couldn't really get herself out. She needed quite a lot of assistance to physically get out of it, which was hilarious. I'll recommend it to you if you want a bit of a giggle.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, lots of options when it comes to planning. Is there anything else you'd like to mention, Si?
No, I think we've covered it a lot, and I think that the takeaway is don't be afraid to just write something down. And like we said, from the back of an envelope through to a huge, great big document or a funeral plan, just some guide, some indication, because you want it to be right for your family. And even if you have that conversation and they're scribbling it down in their phone so that they've got a record for later, uh, I think it helps. I really think it helps. And I've got a lot of experience sitting with families that unfortunately have nothing, no idea at all. And that's really sad.
So just thinking about the comfort it gives the person who's left behind. When my mum died, she was happy to have a bit of a conversation. I knew where she wanted her ashes, some of them in Tenby, where she was born. And when she actually died, we found a little book of just the one poem. When I'm old, I will wear purple, and that became the reading for her. And some of the life story was what she told me ever so recently. So it gave me comfort to think about that, and that she'd made those choices. So it is important and it is helpful if you can take yourself there.
Well, you knew you were doing right by her because that's clearly what you wanted.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Thank you all for joining us. We hope you do explore the options around planning ahead, as Si and I have described.
Yeah, absolutely. And if there's ever anything that you need advice wise, just pick up the phone, drop us a text, whatever it might be. And yeah, there's such a myriad of options that we probably haven't covered. Um, but reach out because funeral directors aren't scary, celebrants aren't scary. We are there in life as well as in death.
That's right. Oh, thanks for that, Si. We'll see you all again soon.
Take care.